Well, hey, this is Brandon Helwig, publisher of UCFsports.com. And we got a big game on Saturday. It's UCF's Big 12 opener at Kansas State. It'll be 12 noon Eastern time kickoff from Bill Snyder Family Stadium. And to get ready for the matchup, I'm excited to be joined today by Derek Young, who is the publisher of K-State Online here on the On3 Rivals Network. Welcome, Derek.
Hey, glad to be here. What's up?
Yeah. Well, it's been a lot of fun. Now we're part of the same network, the same family, a lot of excellent Big 12 sites. And I know K-State Online has really been growing the past few years and is really a great destination for Wildcat fans. So just kind of tell me a little bit about yourself. How long have you been connected with K-State? How long have you been covering the Wildcat program?
Yeah, it's been since I believe 2017 was my first year covering Kansas State. And to put that into perspective, Bill Snyder was still the head coach at the time. So I don't really view myself as someone that's old, but when you can say that you've covered Bill Snyder, you kind of do feel old. It was his last season was 2018. So his last season was my second season on the beat. So I covered Coach Kleiman now, who's obviously the head coach of Kansas State since 2019. So that's been the same. And then when I took over, Bruce Weber was the basketball coach. Now it's obviously Jerome Tang. And I believe his first season was, I always get this wrong. I think 22, 23.
Okay.
No. Yeah. 22, 23. Because, and I know you mentioned about talking about favorite moments. And I don't know. I'd have to think hard about a favorite moment, but obviously a favorite season, and this kind of coincides a little bit with business practices, obviously. What would be 2022, 2023? Because 2022 obviously was when Kansas State won the Big 12. Now, it was obviously before UCF, I think, was introduced to the conference at that point. It was maybe just a year before. But obviously, Kansas State beat TCU in Arlington at AT&T Stadium for the Big 12 championship game. And then the following basketball season, so same academic calendar year, Kansas State goes on and for a while they compete for the Big 12 championship, but obviously come up a little bit short there. I think there might have been fourth or fifth in the league. Obviously, out of 10 teams at the time, I think. And I think it was before UCF joined the league. So it might have been 10 teams, but even fourth or fifth out of a 10-team league at that time was pretty impressive. And then they went and advanced to the Elite Eight that year. It was year one under Jerome Tang. And they beat They beat Kentucky. They beat Michigan State to get there, I believe. Yeah. They beat Kentucky in the second round. They beat Michigan State at Madison Square Garden. In the Sweet 16, the Elite Eight was actually against FAU, and that's where they lost.
Yeah, I remember that locker room video, I think, with Jerome Tang, right? I always kind of remember that season, how he came in and talked to the team and stuff and all that. So, I mean, there's a lot to unpack about K-State this year. Basically, what's wrong? I mean, we could talk about I could ask you this, you could go on for an hour. Like, what is the issue with K-State?
What's wrong? What's wrong?
I mean, they were preseason favorite. I mean, everyone thought, Avery Johnson's the top returning quarterback. Yeah. I know Farmageddon in Dublin, it was weird. That could have gone either way. Obviously, went to Iowa State, but ever since then, K-State doesn't look like the K-State we thought they were going to be. So just kind of to start us off, what's wrong?
Yeah, and to be honest, I don't think it's talent. Like people, I've actually kind of collided with some folks about it. I don't think it's talent. One, if you're losing to North Dakota and Army, or like they
almost lost to North Dakota.
Yeah, they beat North Dakota, but they might as well should have lost that game, right? Like if you're barely beating North Dakota and you're losing Army, it better not be because of talent. I don't think it's because of talent. And even the last game with Arizona, like they played so terrible. Arizona could have been up by 24? Like any, I think, unbiased person would be like, man, Arizona could have been up 24-31 nothing at halftime if they were playing good themselves. I actually left that game thinking worse of Arizona than I thought of them going into the game. That tells you a lot about where Kansas State is at this point in time. And I really don't think it's talent. I think it's a toughness There's a question about toughness of this team. There's a question about care and effort about this team. There's a question about physicality of this team. I think it's the intangibles, the margins, and like you can be one of the more talented teams in the Big 12, but if you don't, give a what, like it's not going to work. You still have to show up. So to me, that's what it ultimately comes down to. Like this team is missing that little panache, that little toughness, and they don't show up. I was told, at halftime of the North Dakota game, I wasn't told then, I was told later that Chris Kleiman there just ripped absolute, what, just laid into his team like he's never done before from a pretty good source too. And it worked because they had a great third quarter. I think they went up multiple scores that quarter actually, but it didn't last, right? Like after a while, they, the disinterest again set in, it dissipated, and North Dakota came back from down multiple scores and nearly won that game. So for me, it's like that it factor, that X factor, whatever you want to call it, that has nothing to do with talent of why this team is lacking what they need to have to ultimately win games on Saturdays or Fridays. I will say this is not to excuse the performance because obviously, like, there is no excuses for barely beating North Dakota, losing to Army, and should have lost to or did lose to Arizona. Like there is no excuses for that. But at the same time, what do they typically say, like scheduling customs, right? Don't schedule a service academy. Well, Kansas State did that. Don't play a road game on Friday night. Out of Kansas State's hands, but they played a road game on Friday night when they went to Arizona before the bye week. And don't go to Ireland because every team that loses that is a complete disaster. Well, Kansas State tried to do all three of those things in the same season, so they might have been asking for it.
Well, let me ask you about Ireland because you were over there, right? It's kind of a once-in-a-lifetime trip to see teams play in Ireland. I know it probably was weird that it was Farmageddon, though. I just kind of briefly tell me how that trip was, just maybe beyond the football field, and was there an estimation of who had the larger fan representation? Was it K-State or Iowa State?
I think pretty clearly Kansas State had a larger representation. Didn't help them, but I think pretty clearly they had the larger representation. But what I would say is my takeaways was my trip was mitigated quite a bit because I had travel issues getting over there. So I was basically there for almost less than 48 hours. So that didn't help things. So you gotta make sure you gotta make sure you get over there in time to actually enjoy it. I didn't enjoy it. It wasn't as fun. I'm not really good on planes to begin with, so all of that kind of waxed me quite a bit. What I would say is the actual game day when you get into the stadium, the atmosphere, you have it's basically 1/3 Ireland, one third Iowa State, 1/3 Kansas State, and it's basically a melting pot and at a fever pitch before the game. It was an amazing. It was one of the better atmospheres I've ever been to. So I will give credit to the game organizers that put together that contest. I would recommend it to other fan bases to go to. Would I recommend it to other programs? Probably not, because everybody that goes to that game and loses, their season turns into a disaster.
Yeah, I think the Big 12 is probably going to make an annual thing of these overseas games. What is it? Arizona State and Kansas, I think, are going to play in London. I know there's a rumor that UCF could be going maybe to London or Dublin in 2027. I mean, there's a few teams being mentioned.
And then, what do I want to say? TCU's going over there next year.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, against North Carolina. We'll see if Bill Belichick's still there or not. I kind of my doubts on that. But I think it might have been one of your writers, Mason. I think it's who it was that kind of wrote a column a week or two ago about Avery Johnson. Like he was supposed to be the chosen one. He Star Wars rapper. He's from Kansas.
It's Skywalker. Yeah,
I remember reading that. And he's from Kansas. Had this homegrown quarterback. What was he, like a 4-star?
Yeah, I'm not even a Star Wars guy, but apparently that resonated with a lot of people.
But that was spot on, really, for I think fan expectations, and it hasn't maybe worked out as quickly as everyone wants. And I don't know, is there kind of resentment there in a little ways? Because wasn't Avery sort of, pushed, or was it Will Howard sort of pushed out, to make room for Avery Johnson? And I know Will Howard goes to Ohio State, wins a national championship. I mean, that might have more to say about Ohio State program in general than Will Howard, but he was the quarterback that won a national championship. So is that kind of in the back of K-State fans' mind right now? Like, we pushed out Will Howard for this guy?
I'm sure it is. I don't know if it's 1-to-1 fair, but obviously, like I got a humongous message board with a lot of different fan viewpoints at this point, and that one has surely been shared more than once, more than twice, more than 3 times. It is starting to populate, and I get it. What I would say is, has Avery Johnson underwhelmed to this point? Yes. Did Will Howard go to win a national title? Yes. So those comparisons and that discussion point was ultimately unavoidable, and it's going to continue to be unavoidable until Avery Johnson meets the standard that, I guess, what I would say accompanied or was the quantifiable reason why you let Will Howard walk out. And he has not done that yet. So it's fair. And at one point I was kind of fighting off people, but you know what? You're allowed to feel that way. You're allowed to be that, I don't know, dismissive is the right word, but a little bit angry that the hype, that the actual performance hasn't met the expectations and the hype at this point. And there's no way around that. What I would say is like part of that, I don't know how in tuned you and your fan base are to the dynamics of the situation, but it just seems like Kansas State hasn't let Avery Johnson be Avery Johnson to a point where they've kind of neutered his legs to a point. Is like what made Avery Johnson, the idea of Avery Johnson, even excitable to not just Kansas State fans, but the national fan base, because I think nationally he was actually a known commodity even before he took a snap. It was like, this guy is dynamic. He can run and he can pass, and we just never seen him run.
Now, why is that Matt Wells, right? He takes over as full-time
OC. Connor Riley was the offensive coordinator last year. This year it's Matt Wells. He didn't run a ton last year either, I'll be honest, for Connor Riley. So I don't know that it's coordinator related. It might be head coach related. It might be Avery Johnson related, because I think he did have a chip. Plus I knew Avery Johnson as a high school recruit, so I know he had a chip on his shoulder. He was pissed off and very angry probably at one point, or bitter that the world, even when he was a high school recruit, didn't necessarily view him as a quarterback, but more as a runner. So I think he entered Kansas State with the ideal motivation and mission to prove to people that he could throw and that he could pass. Quite frankly, now he's a better passer than he is a runner, so he might have overdid it, right? So there's that part of it. But I think Kansas State has also protected him a little too much. With all that being said, and I think that is a problem, and I think that's a little bit of an underbelly of what's going on with Kansas State right now. Their backs are against the walls, right? They're in the corner. If they don't use his legs now, then when? So it would not shock me if all of a sudden they've used the bye week, because they had a bye week, obviously, too.
It helps a lot.
So, but Chris Kleiman is not really good off bye weeks. If you do the research, I think he's 3-7 off bye weeks at Kansas State. But having a bye week and UCF doesn't is something to consider here.
And it's been a tough week for UCF, as you know, with the offensive line coach who died. So a lot of emotion on UCF side.
But they can dial up something in the QB run game here. It would be a good time to do it. And it would make sense to do it because they're in their corner. Their backs are against the wall. Their backs are in the corner. You know that they're not that distanced from a QB run game. Like they've had a QB run game under Chris Kleiman before. If you've gone back in any Kansas State football history at all, you think of the QB run game almost as a a staple of what they do. So it would not shock me if it becomes part of something that they integrate this week.
So obviously we were just talking about Avery Johnson, but you look at the offense as a whole. I mean, the numbers are not great. I think it's number 115 in total offense, number 118 overall FBS and rushing offense. So how much of it is Avery not performing to expectations? How much of it is Dylan Edwards being injured, K-State star running back, who I think we hear is probably coming back for this UCF game healthy? How much of it is an offensive line? Just kind of,
it's about
where would you pin the issues?
It's about everything. The offensive line has been really, really bad. They have a new offensive line coach and a lot of new pieces, probably replacing the most snaps and starts that they've had in a long time, in conjunction with having a new offensive line coach that is coaching offensive line at a P4 level for the first time. So it's a little bit of that. It's a little bit of Avery. It's a little bit of not having Dylan Edwards. It's a little bit of thinking Florida native Joe Jackson would be up to the task, and he's probably not been. So there's a lot of moving parts here. But don't get me wrong, this offensive line's been gross to watch, to be quite honest.
Is it a new group? Is it like a transfer portal group? Is it new starters?
It's not heavy. It's they lost a NFL running back in DJ Giddens, who's the number 2 at the Indianapolis Colts right now behind Jonathan Taylor. They still have Avery Johnson. They still have Jace Brown, also a Florida native, who's killing it right now. To be
wide receiver,
honest. Yeah. But the wide receivers are dropping too many balls, Jace Brown included. They have Jerron Bradley, who was doing really well, but he got hurt before the last game. He got hurt, busted up his thumb against Army. I think he missed the entire game against Arizona. Will probably miss the entire game against UCF as well. He was a Texas Tech, former 1,000-yard transfer at Texas Tech. So he's a big deal. Jerron Tibbs was cracked up to be a big deal. A little bit hit or miss so far at wide receiver. The offensive line's been atrocious. That's really, really hurt. And it's hard to be good at Kansas State without a good offensive line. It is. That's supposed to be the fabric of your team, right? Your culture is physicality, toughness. You're freaking Kansas State. You mow people down. Well, it's hard to run the ball. It's hard to protect. Yeah. You have to have a good offensive line in Kansas State. Right now, it's not.
Yeah, as far as K-State's defense, what's the early prognosis there? The numbers are a little better than the offensive numbers, but just kind of tell us about the K-State defense and how they've performed and maybe some of the players to watch.
I think the pass rush was supposed to be really, really good, and it's probably underperformed or underwhelmed to this point. It would not shock me if at some point it catches up with those expectations and standards, but to this point it has not. And that's put a little bit of more of a burden on the rest. The secondary was bad last year. They basically replaced the entire secondary because they were like, it's bad. We need new parts. The new parts have not been good yet. So it's a work in progress. They like to blitz, and it has not gone well. They haven't disguised it well enough. People pick it up, and it puts their defense in a bind. Another problem is they're basically overhauling an entire defensive scheme in one season, right? They were the 3-3-5 last year. They're the 4-2-5 this year, and they did it with a shortened spring ball, and it just hasn't gone well. So I think that schematic shift, I think, has given some of the players problems as well.
So it's an 11 a.m. game. I went to Kansas State it was UCF's very first Big 12 game 2 years ago in 2023. And, obviously I haven't been everywhere in the Big 12 yet. I've been to Texas Tech and West Virginia and some other places, but K-State had the best atmosphere, I thought. That game was rocking.
Yeah,
like 8 o'clock at night. But this is 11 a.m. Like, what's the vibe for the fan base? Is it still going to be rocking at 11 a.m.? Will it be a slow arriving crowd, maybe a little bit lackadaisical, or what?
I would say 11 a.m. I've covered the team since 2017, and I covered some really terrible teams. The atmosphere does not shift a whole lot one way or another. Like, you can tell when it's a big game, there's a little bit of a buzz and a vibe in the atmosphere. But when they have been completely dog crap, the atmosphere and the overall vibe of the stadium has not changed, which I will give credit to the Kansas State fan base for that kind of loyalty. Iowa State's the same way, right? I don't know how many times you guys have been to Iowa State, There's been plenty of times where I've been there when they've been absolute dog crap, and for some reason, those people will support them to the end of time. Kansas State is pretty similar. Now, this season will be a test, I think, and this Saturday will be a test, especially starting 1 and 3. But it would not shock me if that stadium is still relatively packed and kind of humming. Humming being a relative to what other places would be at 11 a.m., right? Yeah. There's not a lot of places that are absolute hyped at 11 a.m. unless it's for, a top 25 matchup, which this one will not be. And UCF, and this is meant as no disrespect, but UCF is not going to technically organically generate a lot of attention from Kansas State fans either. So this one will test how loyal they are. I'll say that.
So kind of on that note, I mean, UCF, everyone from the outside figured UCF would struggle this year. I think it was preseason last place. I know our fans have noticed your Big 12 power rankings and all that stuff. Yeah. No one had faith in Scott Frost. And they're 3-0. I mean, I expected them to be 3-0. UCF's a lot better than North Carolina, which, I mean, I don't know what that means right now because North Carolina, I think, is dreadful.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of questions about UCF. But just right now for K-State, is this being viewed as a must-win game? I mean, to kind of salvage the season? Because if you lose to UCF and you're 1-4, I mean, how is K-State viewing this game?
If they lose this game, 2-10 is on the table. If they win this game, I don't think they would consider it salvaging the season, though. It would
I guess the process to start to salvage the season, I should say, because it would be damaging to lose this game, I would think, for K-State.
I think the start of the process to salvaging the season would be you must beat UCF, like you just said, but it wouldn't. No one's going to take it serious until they see what you do the following week against Baylor, like because you can beat UCF and still go like 3-9 or 4-8. That's no disrespect meant towards UCF, but like let me go through Kansas State's schedule a little bit here. If you give me a little bit of time, but like you can beat UCF and you can beat Oklahoma State.
Yeah.
But what happens?
You can lose the next 4.
But then, let's say if you beat UCF, oh yeah, we're 2-3. But then you play Baylor, TCU, KU, and Texas Tech, and then all of a sudden, boom, you're 2-7. Well, then you can beat Oklahoma State. Okay, sweet, you're 3-7. Then you play Utah, and then maybe you can beat Colorado on senior night. I don't know. Like it is meant as noted. Like I know this is a UCF podcast, but like UCF is one of the 3 easiest games left. It's UCF, Oklahoma State, and Colorado.
Yeah, I got you. So, I mean, let's say whether this is a win or loss, but there's a gauntlet of games after UCF. Yeah. Let's say
like you're not.
Yeah.
Kansas State football team will not prove anything to its fans by beating UCF.
Yeah. Well, let's say for the sake of argument, whether this is a win or loss.
Yeah.
You lose maybe to TCU, you lose to Kansas, you lose to Texas. There's a lot of games in there. You can technically lose Baylor. So if that record is not looking good come November, is it crazy to say that Coach Chris Kleiman, is his seat getting warmer? I mean, everyone talks about these things days about coaches. I mean, maybe it's unfair to even talk about hot seat for a coach that's been pretty successful, but
a little unfair because he won the Big 12 in 2022. He won 8 games in 23, and he won 8 games last year. That at a program like Kansas State, if I'm being completely honest, it is a little unfair. That's pretty impressive. But we're not in a climate where unfair matters, right? We're in a climate where you have to build to make sure you're making the next break, whatever it may be. Like if it's power 2, power 4, like what right when they say 2030, 2031, there's a super league, whatever it may be. If you're not doing everything you can right now to make that break, you're not doing your job. So the stakes are a little bit higher, so that's why it's a little unfair to him. But it's like what Kansas State is backed into a corner themselves as a program and as an institution, because he has. I don't think anyone would say eight wins at Kansas State is fireable, but So the only times where he didn't do that would be this year in 2020, which was the COVID year, that nobody really counts. At the same time, do you have 30 million to fire him? His buyout is pretty undoable at the moment. So, and then there's another layer to an onion. I don't know if you or your fans are following Colin Klein.
Yeah, I have him on my other screen. I was going to ask you if you didn't mention him. Is he kind of like the fantasy message board future head coach, right?
He is the fantasy, right? Like, think about if you're a UCF fan and the best player of your entire program,
Mackenzie Milton, who's on the staff now as quarterback coach first year, but that would be the comparison.
Yeah, well, that he's coached now. Let's say he's coached for 8 to 10 years and has been an offense coordinator for 3 to 4 years. No, he's been an offense coordinator for 5 or 6 years, and 3 of them has been in an SEC powerhouse where he's now becoming one of the best offense coordinators in the SEC. That's Colin Klein. He's becoming one of the best offense coordinators in the SEC at Texas A&M. Was a Heisman Trophy candidate at Kansas State. He will be a head coach next year. What do you do if you're Kansas State when you have Chris Kleiman, one bird in the hand, right? But like Colin Klein is ready to flee the cuckoo's nest, so to speak.
Gotcha. So, like, what's kind of the K-State perception of UCF just as a program joining the Big 12? You know, obviously it was a weird few years with expansion, and the Big 12 was really backed into a corner, and they had to pretty much go get the 4 best programs out of the group of 5 between, you know, UCF, Cincinnati, BYU, Houston, and UCF. I mean, it's kind of been a slow start, arguably, obviously. You know, from football standpoint, have not competed as well as maybe they would have hoped under Gus Malzahn. So I know the Big 12 really hasn't seen, I think, UCF's full potential, but I know it's still early. This will be the second meeting, Big 12 meeting anyway, between UCF and K-State. What's kind of the view of UCF?
I think they're still waiting for UCF to make their splash, to kind of make their mark, to kind of show why they were at it, to be quite honest. Because, like you said, it's been a little bit of a drudge so far for UCF in the Big 12. So it's like, I will say the pessimistic fans, like, you need to start showing us why you were added to the league. But like a big picture fan would say, we get why you were added to the league. Like, you have more of a ceiling of potential than anyone that we've added out of all the 8 schools, whether it be when UCF was added was Cincinnati, BYU, and Houston.
Houston, yeah.
Or Arizona State, Colorado, Utah after that, like, because of their potential spending power down the road. It's all down the road for UCF, which I think is hard to quantify, because at some point they're going to have one of the more, what would I say, lucrative or exploitative donor bases than anyone's got, just because they graduate so many. I mean,
there's a big enrollment number, and there's money in Florida, but you have to cultivate, you know, those donors, and they've done a good job. You have to fight over
the money in Florida with Miami, Florida State, and Florida. That's a little bit of an issue, but yeah.
Well, I know some UCF fans will be making the trip. It's tough being in Florida. There's no games you can jump in the car and, you know, drive a few hours to get to. You know, like, I'm flying to Kansas City and then I got to drive 2 hours to Manhattan.
You can fly to Manhattan.
Yeah, I know you can, but, you know, you have to connect. And, you know, honestly, by the time you do that, I could have just driven there. So anyway, no matter how you get there, it's not easy. So I don't know how many UCF fans will be there. I know the fans that came 2 years ago really enjoyed their time. And I've always recommended, if you want to go to a game, I mean, the best experience, atmosphere I've had has been in Manhattan. So as a guy who, I don't know how long you've been in Manhattan, if 17. It's
Yep.
Okay, so you've been there a few years now. What would you recommend? I know Aggieville is kind of what the big hub of kind of nightlife and bar scene. What would you recommend maybe for fans coming into town? Are there some places? Is it Aggieville? Is it other hot spots, restaurants? What would you recommend people check out?
Yeah, I've covered a team since 17, been in Manhattan since 21, I think, because I was in Kansas City before that. And what I would say, if you're just looking to be in a college life atmosphere bar scene, then Aggieville is your choice there. When you got O'Malley's, Tanner's, bars of that nature, there's like 15, 20 of them, quite frankly, and they're all beside each other. So you get one, you get them all. for food wise though, like that's where I kind of am a little bit there, and I'm a bourbon guy,
Okay.
so not necessarily a beer guy. So bourbon and Baker is what I love. It's on point. It's probably a couple miles from the stadium. It's not walking distance from the stadium, but that's a place with really good food. And obviously you can get some upper class bourbons if that's your thing. Colbert's. No one ever recommends this because it's a golf course. So you're talking about just a restaurant, clubhouse, but Colbert Hills has a restaurant, and it's closer to the stadium than even Bourbon and Baker that I just mentioned, or the Aggieville that I just mentioned. Go to the clubhouse restaurant. The food is sensational. They have just as good of a bourbon selection. They have beers. They have wines. Do that, and the prices are not even that astronomical. You can get a round of 18 if you want to. Like that. If I was ever going to do it, if I was an opposing fan, that would be the way to go.
Awesome suggestion. So, score prediction. Have you thought about, how this game's going to play out? I know it's tough when I get asked this question. I'm put on the spot. I don't know how to react, but
I don't know either. Kansas State is a better team, but that hasn't really mattered this year. They were a better team than Army. They were a lot better team than North Dakota. They're better than Arizona. I don't think anyone's even going to argue that. They're better than Arizona. We're going to find out really quickly, in my opinion, and Arizona fans hate me for this, that Arizona is not that good. And I don't think many people would argue with that isn't an Arizona fan. But Kansas State has a way of not achieving what they should achieve this year. What I would say is I feel like it's going to be like the third quarter of the North Dakota game, but right off the bat here. The third quarter of because I was told at halftime, North Dakota, Chris Kleiman went in at halftime and just absolutely ripped ass like no other before. And we saw Kansas State played their best quarter of football against North Dakota in that third quarter, and they turned basically a 3-point deficit, I think, into a 2-score lead, and they were coasting. But it only lasted one quarter. And then North Dakota came all the way back in the fourth quarter, and Kansas State had to fight for their lives in the last drive and won the game on an Avery Johnson touchdown. I think this could be similar. I could see Kansas State, because they had 2 weeks of everyone telling them, you suck, you're flat, you don't try hard, your effort sucks, that they play like a quarter and a half year of just outstanding football. But they don't have the maturity, the responsibility, just professional approach to things to keep that going. So then it starts to wilt away, and that's when UCF starts to whittle back. And I think, like North Dakota, Kansas State is the lead going into the fourth quarter. UCF erases that, maybe even takes a lead, and for some reason Kansas State inexplicably wins the game, because they don't win any game on purpose right now. So I will say Kansas State 31-28, with no conviction, really. And if UCF wins, I'm not surprised.
Gotcha. Man, well, Derek, I appreciate you taking some time to educate us about K-State football, and I'm looking forward to heading out to Manhattan this weekend. I'll definitely look for you in the press box, and thank you for your time. Okay, Derek?
Yep, no problem.
All right, man. Take care. Thanks.